presentation of the day is Who Dropped the Ball? And Institutional Analysis of the Baylor Rape Scandal. Lauren Beasley from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and Emmett Gill from the University of Texas at Austin.
Our title, Who Dropped the Ball? Institutional Analysis of the Baylor Rape Scandal. So where our case study takes place is at Baylor University, which is in Waco, Texas, which if y'all are not familiar with the state, it's literally right in between where we are in Dallas and Austin. So Baylor is a small, it's about 14,000 undergraduate students university, private Baptist. And as we're all here to talk about sports, right, they're a Division I NCAA team, and they spend about $60 million a year on athletics, which increased hugely after they hired Art Briles as their head coach back in 2007.
And I think the important part to remember about what's going on at Baylor now is that once, sort of when Briles came in, this was on the heels of the Reginald Dennehy murder at the hands of Carlton Dotson and the cover-up by Dave Bliss in the athletic department. So, Baylor is not a secret to scandal.
So I was really happy earlier we kind of started to talk about some bystander intervention that's going on. We talked about the NCAA now requiring student athletes to go through sexual assault training once a year and everything. And those are all really great micro and meso level interventions. However, I think the piece that we miss a lot is that more institutional macro level. So I'm going to go over quickly. It's going to be a lot of academic jargon, so I apologize. But some of the institutional theories that we miss. So the first is institutional logic. So kind of, as the picture shows, right, it's that top down. It's that main institutional values, beliefs, that is going to influence the actions of everybody within the institution, from the CEO down to the janitor, down to the students. The next big institutional theory is that of legitimacy. And legitimacy is the cultural and societal support of an institution or organization. And this is really the goal of any organization, right, is to be seen as legitimate, and especially within their institutional field. And when we say institutional field, that's literally just organizations that are similar to one another. So Baylor's institutional field would be other NCAA Division I schools. And the next theory is institutional isomorphism. And what happens in this is when institutions within an institutional field start taking on best practices they see from other institutions. So what happens is over time, institutions and their policies all become similar, and their actions become similar to one another, right? So for Baylor, and when they kind of hit it big time in their football program, they all of a sudden need to look to other Big 12 schools who have really successful football programs and kind of take on some of their best policies and practices. And then finally, decoupling. And decoupling occurs when rules are bent, broken, or negotiated to satisfy an external audience while maintaining internal efficiency. So really it's when they want to remain like they're doing the right thing on the outside, right, or they're legitimate, but internally they're kind of starting to cut corners. So those are the major kind of theories we're going to be applying to our case study. We're going to go through a quick timeline. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with kind of what happens. I just wanted to highlight a few points. So in 2004, the Dear Colleague letter is released by Congress, which requires all federally funded universities to hire a Title IX coordinator. And Title IX, I'm sure many of y'all know, is just the office on college campuses that deal with sexual assault. Fast forward to November 19th, 2011, Baylor upsets OK State. And this is RG3's big Heisman moment, right? So this is when Baylor football became big time, and there was that expectation to win. And fast forward a little bit under a year, in April 2012, Devon Elliott is charged with the sexual assault of fellow Baylor student Jasmine Hernandez. He is subsequently suspended from the football team, and he is now serving the sentence in jail. And this is the first public sexual assault that's made public. Then in 2013, Iguachu sexually assaults a Baylor soccer player. He is found innocent by the university's Title IX investigation. He is now currently on trial in court. Fast forward to November 2014, Patty Crawford is hired as Baylor's first full-time Title IX coordinator. So this is a whole 10 years after they're technically required to have this office in place. And what Baylor was doing is they were having kind of other university officials, so maybe somebody in the president's office or something like that takes on some Title IX responsibilities part-time, which is how they were complying with the federal law. Then in early 2015, the new Title IX office first hears about an alleged gang rape of female student athletes by 5 football players back in 2012. So with those, it's just really clear kind of that gap in implementation of Title IX, right? In September 2nd, 2015, Baylor hires Pepper Hamilton to conduct an investigation of how they handled the sexual assaults. A report was released in May 2016, but not a lot of details. It's basically just a list of recommendations for the university. In February of 2016, ESPN's Outside the Line reports that 3 separate women, including Hernandez, had filed complaints against Vaughn Elliott. And that files 6 incidents of sexual assault that were not investigated by the university or reported to Title IX. In November, some of this stuff over is all the same. So in October of 2016, Title IX coordinator Patty Crawford resigns. She cites neglect by the upper administration to give them support to investigate the athletic department. Earlier that year, right, we had heard like Starr was demoted, both Bryles was the head coach and McCall, the athletic director, were fired. Kind of the big, in October 20th, 2016, the Wall Street Journal first made public the Regents report. And what the report found is that there were 17 incidents of sexual assault committed by 19 different Baylor football players between 2011 and 2015. That either did not go reported, were not put into Title IX, or Title IX heard about it but did not fully investigate. So by the end of 2016, and this is still current, there was a total of 4 different Title IX lawsuits filed against Baylor, which included 10 victims or 10 Jane Doe petitions. However, in November, and even today, the NCAA has announced it will not place any sanctions on Baylor or the athletic department for the handling of the sexual assault investigations. So those are some of the main kind of points of the case study. Yes, ma'am.
Just as a point of reference, those of us who live in this state.
Yes.
The report was never released from the law firm. It was claimed that it was a work document and a confidential document. So what was released was what you said.
Just the list of recommendations.
But their investigative work and all their information that was shared to the Regents was client privilege and confidentiality, so it was never released. The other issue across the state, and I think probably across the nation, is that Baylor has been around a long, long time. I'm not a Baylor grad, so I can't tell you what year they were established, but it is considered a major Baptist Christian university. So there was undercurrent that this was totally antithetical to their values as a university and as a school.
Yes, absolutely. And that kind of goes to the institutional logics that we're talking, right? They're kind of coming in as this highly religious Baptist institution. So it really rocked the state for any of y'all who lived in Texas when this kind of came out, especially when the Regents report came out. Absolutely. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gill.
All right, so we're going to talk about something that I know about, y'all. All right, so this basically was what we call a critical case study analysis. You know, in other words, you know, we felt as if this was the best methodology in terms of completing this study because we're qualitative in nature in terms of social work. And so it helps us bring meaning to social situations, and that's what critical case studies do. And so basically what we did was we had an opportunity to review media articles. One of the things that I've done as a researcher is I've used media articles because when I was coming up in the academy, it was so difficult to get research on college athletes. But everything that happens, the media knows about it, or most of the things that happen. And so our sample size, which included the Huffington Post, USA Today, you know, the Statesman, various national papers, videos, and documents, was a sample of about 78. We're still counting because right now, you know, our feeling is that things continue to happen. So we haven't reached that point of saturation that we heard about earlier today. But what we do with these critical case studies is that we engage in pattern matching and confirmation and peer debriefing, which allows us to confirm the themes that we have found or uncovered, as well as look at the process. And so, when we think about the findings, you know, the data suggests that the institutionalism that we thought was unfolding at Baylor actually occurred. I mean, the reality is that Baylor had a number, and some counts have 17, some counts have 19, it may be more, but Baylor engaged in what we might term as a cover-up because they wanted to protect the fact that they had overcome the issue with regard to the basketball program. Now we're now experiencing an outstanding football program, and they wanted to make sure that they protected, you know, the capital gain from that. And I want you to understand, when we're talking about college sports, it's not just the $60 million that the Baylor football program made, but it's the applications, the increase in applications, the increase in admissions, the increase in research dollars. All those are assets that are related to the football program. All right. The second piece is that our data analysis confirmed this institutional isomorphism. I need you to understand this, all right? You just follow me because I talk real fast and sometimes I'm not as clear as I think I am. But this is what happened. When you see this isomorphism, what you actually see is you see one entity of the university taking on the characteristics of another. And our esteemed audience member here mentioned that Baylor is a Baptist Christian university. But it wasn't the Baptist Christian University that was driving this boat, it was the athletic department. So what happened with regard to the isomorphism is that the university took on the values of the athletic department to make sure that they were protecting the assets. And so what Lauren talked about earlier with this notion of decoupling. Decoupling is the breaking of the rules. But what was going on at the same time that we saw the breaking of the rules was when you break the rules and you cover it up, that's that isomorphism happening at the same time. Hence, two gloves going together. And so that's what we saw here at Baylor. And so what we did through our analysis is we tend to count these instances of isomorphism and decoupling. And lastly, the institutional logics. Well, it'll be close to last. I got one slide. The institutional logic. When you talk about logic, you talk about assumption. Back to philosophy, we talk about logic, we talk about assumption, right? Oftentimes, and we know this, whether it's at our job, whether it's with our spouse, whether it's at the grocery store trying to negotiate a price, our logic is not always clear. We are not overt about what our logic is. So Baylor's not going to come out and say, you know what, we're ignoring all of this because we want to protect our football team. What Baylor had the opportunity to do was take that Christian-based Baptist policy around sexuality and sex and put out there that sex is not something that you engage in unless you're in marriage, okay? So you've got that as sort of the overarching philosophy of the school. And then at the same time, you got this major football program happening. So what actually developed at Baylor was this mock bureaucracy that perpetuated the isomorphism and the institutional logics by not pointing the victims towards Title IX or the Waco Police or student affairs or the judicial services, but to the football coach, to the AD, and to the president. And so that would exemplify the institutional logic. And despite Baylor's hiring of Patty Crawford and the Pepper Hamilton report and trying to obtain some legitimacy, the reality is that the institutional logics were too strong. You know, it's no different from UNC and the paper courses. It's no different from Patino at Louisville. Once you go down that road, and you invest in the arms race, it's on. There is no turning around. Football became religion. Okay? So, you know, and I'm sure my colleague here will have more points with regard to our findings, but what I want to close by saying is, well, why is this relevant to social work? One of the things that I found is that if it reads, it bleeds. And what I found is that one way to bring about attention to social work issues in college athletics like sexual assault is to use the various scandals. Duke lacrosse, Rutgers women's basketball, University of Missouri, Penn State University. Okay? All of those are opportunities for us as social workers to say in Penn State, 4 social workers were in contact with Jerry Sandusky, yet it went on for 18 years. And so these scandals provide us with an opportunity to bring attention to our work. Yes, we need the quantitative work. Yes, absolutely. God knows we need that. We also need to take these media accounts and these accounts by journalists and utilize them to bring attention to our work. And so I thank you so much for your attentiveness and your time. We've had a great TED Talk session, and if you have any questions, keep calling. It's the conclusion. Thank you. Hold on a minute. Any questions? Yes, sir. Dan.
In your findings, I know you mentioned that very briefly, but I always found it interesting that Art Briles is looked at, like the Black Plague, nobody wants to be a part of it, but Ian McCaw's at Liberty and he got a job pretty quickly, and everybody's praising the job he's doing at Liberty now.
So I think part of, and we didn't get to go into like all of the institutional theories, but part of like the decoupling process and the democracy process is you're able to kind of scapegoat one person. We're able to say, oh, we're protecting our institutional logic because it was just this one person. Baylor didn't partake in it, it was Art Briles. So I think they really kind of singled him out a lot. I think the media did too, because we're not taking a deeper look at what was going on in Baylor as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that was a part of also the NCAA's move now.
Yeah.
With regard to enforcement, they're no longer saying, coaches can say, I didn't know.
Right.
And so we're seeing that happen now again, and I hate to mention Patino, but we're seeing it happen again there. And so, maybe next down the line, we're starting to hold ADs more accountable as well. Great question, man. Great question. Any other questions?
I said Liberty's a Baptist college. Isn't that interesting how institutionality almost connects the Baptist colleges?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think that happened again with Bliss. I think he is.
Well, but we've got examples of universities who are football powerhouses for the last 25 years that are in small communities, and
Yes.
things happen, DWIs, rape, assault, all kinds of stealing, all kinds of things, and they don't get taken to the jail. The football coach gets called, and he gets, handled on the sly, and we just move on.
Yeah.
Because there is a culture of protection of the athlete
Right.
in order to protect the program, in order to have a winning program, because as you mentioned, Dr. Gill, that, you get additional applications to that university, you get additional monies, donors like to give if you're gonna have a winning program or a successful program.
Yeah, that's an outstanding point, and it's critical for us to think about that, because as social workers, are we gonna walk through our athletic departments like this?
No, I agree with you, that I think it's a tremendous opportunity. Social work has had difficulty, in my opinion, has had difficulty championing ourselves in what we do, even though we are the leader providers of mental health since the 1920s. The man on the street, the media doesn't know that, because somehow clinical social work gets a bad rap for whatever reason. So we have trouble taking advantage of those opportunities, but I agree with y'all and other speakers we've heard today that there is an opportunity for us to be helpful and to facilitate people, going into psychotherapy, going into group therapy, going into counseling, careers, lots of transition things to help them get their lives together. because college athletes at the most are 25 years old when they graduate or finish their college career.
Absolutely, absolutely. Other question? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Leon.
Yeah, so, given the fact that Baylor's had like two major, scandals, they had the Dennehy, scandal with Dave Bliss. They've had the rape the rape scandal, most recently, with Art Briles. What has the institution itself like put in place to prevent, you know, the third scandal, from happening? Because these things, even though they seem like, you know, the time frame seems kind of like far, but it's relatively a small time frame for, you know, two major scandals to happen, you know, at a major institution in the athletic department.
Yeah, I would encourage you, I mean, the recommendations, like the whole Pepper Hamilton report isn't available.
Right.
But it's like a 10-page document where they have a ton of different recommendations for the athletic department and the university as a whole. So I would encourage you to read through those. And Baylor has started to implement some of those recommendations. But I think it's hard. They're having issues with it as well, just funding and trying to allocate funds and stuff. But at least with this, they put more money into the Title IX office there. So they have, I think it's like four or five full-time staff members now. So that's one thing I know specifically that they've done in regards to sexual assault allegations. But I would encourage you to look up the Pepper Hamilton because they are starting to kind of go through some of that.
And I think that, you know, one of the challenges then is going to be, you know, we just saw what happened with the NCAA and UNC.
Right.
UNC just skated. I mean, they skate. They ain't got no worry about nothing. And so not right now we're wondering who's gonna be, you know, sort of the popo. Who's gonna be the police? You know, you don't have the NCAA. At best right now we've got journalists acting as undercover agents to make sure that these things don't happen. You know, and working in athletics, as many of you do, you know, we're dealing with 18 to 25-year-olds, you know, 100 or so players on a football team, you know, 60 or 50 on some rowing teams, you know, women's rowing teams. So, and they're adolescents, so it's really hard to police these kids. I think that's what is really going to happen in terms of Baylor, in terms of prevention, is going to come from the U.S. Department of Education. It's about time for them to step in.
For sure.
It really is about time for them to step in terms of college sports. They have to, because right now the NCAA is, you know, it's not what it used to be. Yes, and then
I want to preface this comment by saying I love college sports, and I think that college sports does tremendous good for lots of people. I think the U.S. Department of Education under Betsy DeVos were screwed. What we're describing here is the willingness of a sports machine to sacrifice young people. To say to girls, it's okay for you to get raped because we're going to make $60 million.
For sure.
To say to young men, it's okay for you not to learn from your mistakes and to keep engaging in criminal activity. And to say to them, we're going to beat your bodies up and we're going to pretend to give you an education with paper classes.
Right.
And nobody's stopping it. What do we do socially? That's my question.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even gonna mess up what you said by following up on it. Just gonna let it marinate. Like the sauces we about to have at the social, but just gonna let it marinate.
But just as a comment, the Texas legislature, which only meets every 2 years, thank you God, has passed additional legislation, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the bill numbers, but they have passed additional legislation enabling and protecting students who come forward to make complaints or allegations, or to how they give charges of rape and assault on college campus, at least in Texas.
Yes.
You know, and so I suspect that is another enforcement arm that may step in other than Congress, since Congress can't seem to pass major legislation. But, you know, you do have state legislators who can, you know, say that you have to do this on their state university.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's gonna be a really good, like you said, kind of another arm. But I think what we saw at Baylor too is we had, students did make outcries, but it was to their coaches, it was to our Riles. And if those coaches aren't gonna go over to the Title IX office, or if those coaches aren't gonna go up to the president, or, you know, gonna go to the Waco police, kind of like Dr. Gill brought up, it's gonna stay within the athletic department. So I think it's also figuring out, we might have these legislations and, but figuring out how to kind of change that culture within an athletic department.
Yeah. And the thing about it is coaches used to be teachers.
Right.
Teachers mandated reporters.
Yes, now,
You know, so now we've got coaches who, you know, don't have that education. So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is party study, is this a concluded study or you're ongoing?
It's ongoing because much like my work with Rutgers, State
Yeah.
University of New Jersey, Lauren, no offense, it just keeps going. You know, so we even, you know, there was an article in ESPN a couple of weeks ago that I sent to Lauren, you know, in terms of, they were talking about,
the former Baylor president,
yeah,
Starr came out and made some comment about, oh, they were asking for it or something like that, yeah. So, I mean, stuff is still coming out.
yeah.
And
yeah.
the reason I asked is because I know in all of our studies, we try to find some balance as well, not balance, but just interjections of, how should I say this? And I'm totally in agreement as a female and feminist and understanding equality. But at the